guys, and welcome back to another episode of Fit and Focus for Remote Work and Digital Nomads podcast. I'm your host, Angela Shurina, your brain's coach, and here I'm bringing to you all the tools, all the brain tools you can use to make your brain work better, to help your brain do its absolute best so you can do your absolute best and experience the life exactly the way you want to experience it or as close to it as possible. So this is the purpose of this podcast because, guys, when we know how our brain works, when we know how to make it help us do all the things that we know we want to do, we gotta do, we must do in order to build the lives, the relationships, the bodies, the health that we want. If we want all of that, we gotta learn how to use our brain because our environment got so distractions full that it's becoming harder and harder to actually be more productive. And by productive, I mean getting the meaningful stuff done. Just by feeling busy, we're not productive. But setting the goals, setting the directions, designing the intentions for what you'd like your life to be, and then making progress towards that in the most effective manner possible, that's being productive. And the more distractions we allow into our life, the less there is chance that this is going to happen. And so let's learn how to use our brain better to filter our environment in a way that is helping us to go exactly where we want to go in life. And today, the topic of today's podcast is procrastination. And it's one of the major stumbling blocks, one of the major walls, one of the major challenges on your way to getting anything done. What is procrastination? Procrastination is the general or broad definition of procrastination is delaying or postponing something. Either something that you're supposed to do because you have a deadline outside of you, work deadline, studying deadline, you have an agreement to do something with other people, right? And you need to get something done for that. Or it's delaying and postponing things that are important for you to move forward in life. But you keep saying, I'm going to do this later and later and later and then. And then it becomes this huge, big pile, this energy sucking thing that seems to be immovable, like some sort of mountain. And then it's harder for us to take actions, even though the thing actually, when we start doing that, might not be as big at all. It might be actually quite simple, small, and approachable, right? So procrastination. Sometimes people mean forgetfulness by procrastination. They're like, I want to do foam rolling, right? It's just a thing that a lot of my clients who were not into a lot of recovery procedures or routines, they would always forget, I always, remind myself in the morning that I want to do foam rolling by the time I get to bed. It's I forgot again, right? So here, I'm not going to talk about that kind of procrastination. It's not so much procrastination, it's forgetfulness. And it's about setting up a better system of reminders in your environment and setting up better routines. So it's not like procrastination in general sense, it works like that. You got to do it, but you keep telling yourself, I'm going to do it on Monday. I'm going to do it on the weekends. And then the weekends on Monday come and you're again saying, I'm going to do this, that. So this is procrastination. You remember about that, but you just keep delaying it, keep postponing it. Whereas forgetfulness is I forgot to do that thing again. I wondered, but it just slipped my mind, right? A little bit different if you can sense this slight difference. So forgetfulness is not procrastination. Procrastination. Why procrastination happens? basically why it happens is that on some level, your brain decided without consulting you, your brain doesn't talk. Well, sometimes it seems like it's talking to us, but it's just usually a lot of random thoughts coming into our mind for one reason or the other, right? So procrastination happens because your brain decided, well, the reward is not that big. It might be too far in the future, too uncertain, right? So we're not sure about reward, like how valuable that action is. But the action seems to be so big and it's going to take so much energy, so much time, so many resources. And so your brain made the calculation at some point, because your brain's primary purpose is to manage your energy so you don't die and keep on living. So your brain decided, okay, it seems like it's not worth it. So we're just going to keep delaying it until we decide to not do it at all and not waste our precious energy. So that's why it's happened. You might say, well, that is not true. I know that is important. Maybe, but maybe the cost of that importance is too big. So you have kind of like equation or ratio, right? The smaller the reward appears to be in your brain, the bigger the cost, the less chances you're actually going to do the action. And the bigger the reward and the smaller the cost, the more likely you are to do the action, right? That's why if I tell you, let's say you have an apple right in front of you and it's juicy and it's delicious and it looks so yummy, and I tell you, well, if you're hungry, eat it. You're most probably going to eat it, right? If you're hungry and you don't have some sort of allergies, big thing these days. But then if I told you, well, I have these juicy apples, but you have to go to the garden, even if it's not that far, it's outside and you have to pick those apples from the tree. You're like, might not be that hungry, right? So the same apple, but the reward is kind of distant, kind of uncertain, and you have to do some work, and you like check with yourself, maybe not worth it, right? Plus apple is not such a calorie, energy dense reward. So you see what happens? But the same kind of thing happens in our world. It's just our world is much more complex than an apple. And that's why sometimes it seems that it is not true. But if you think about that, what is the thing that you were procrastinating on? Might be, I was talking to one of the entrepreneurs that I worked with, and he wants to do a podcast. But he's like, maybe in a month when I'm better with my business, when there is less to do, right? So for him doing a podcast, yeah, he wants to do that. He sincerely wants to do that. But at the same time, the reward isn't clear. The costs for him seem too big. Like you have to find the guest, you have to find the recording equipment, you have to find the host, you have to figure out all these logistics, right? What's the payoff? Well, he doesn't know yet what can be a payoff. And that's why he is not proceeding with that podcast all that much. He's like, maybe next month, maybe next month. So in order for your reward to be bigger and worthy, you gotta check that your reward hits like 3 points. That is clear, like what reward actually is. And if it's not clear, like with the case of a podcast, then you got to talk yourself into that. You see, your brain is very talkable into. Whatever you say to your brain with enough belief in that, whatever you believe, your brain will believe too. So you might say, well, that can bring a lot of business opportunities outside of my network. I get to introduce to all these people who will invite a lot more people. And that can create potentially like super big opportunities. Like I know of this host who did his podcast and his business blew up, right? I know of this person, of that person. So you start growing and making clear all the rewards that can come from doing that podcast. The other thing, those rewards, they gotta be really vivid. Like you gotta believe them, imagine them, how it all can happen, how you know it happened to a lot of other people, right? You gotta, again, keep talking to yourself, to your brain, until the reward is really big, juicy, clear, right? It's right there. You can grab it. And it's also gotta be meaningful to you. Now, it's one thing when somebody told you, Justin, it's might be a good idea for you to do a podcast. And you're like, yeah, really, never really thought about it. It's one thing. And the other thing is like, I really want to do the podcast. Like, it means something to me deep inside. Like, I love talking to people. I love doing interviews, right? Or I love doing podcasts for some other reason. Like, for me, it's a very meaningful experience. And so once your reward hits this 3 point, clear, close, and vivid, meaningful, you have a good chance of stopping your procrastination, that thing. And cost, you gotta minimize them as much as possible. And what it means is you gotta start simple. Keep it simple, stupid, right? You gotta make it smaller. You gotta focus only on the next step. With the case of the podcast, okay, I can interview one of my friends to start. I can record it with my phone and a microphone. I can use one of the free offers from one of the podcast hosts, like almost all of them do the initial free of charge offer, right? You make it really, really small, the cost, and you make the reward really, really big and meaningful. And that's how you get a chance to stop procrastinating much, much bigger. Well, the chance you're gonna stop procrastination. And another important thing, of course, is scheduling. Like, okay, now you decide you are doing this podcast like right now. If not now, then tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. So you're gonna pick up your phone, you're gonna call your friend and like, hey, Jake, let's do podcast. I want to start this thing. When are you free? Once like the next time you have, let's say 90 minutes because it's first time. So, you might also want to catch up. So when, and you schedule it and you're good to go. You find a quiet room, you get your phone and you record the conversation, right? Super simple. So that is kind of the foundation of mastery of your procrastination. Most of you guys are procrastinating. And when I procrastinate, it's the same thing. I hardly ever procrastinate because I know how it works. And you realize when you are working on making the reward larger, what it means is you are boosting your dopamine production. And the dopamine is a molecule of goal, of drive, of taking action. So that is what you're doing, right? But your dopamine is also cost sensitive, right? So the cost is too high and it doesn't at least equal the perceived reward that you're going to get, then there is less chance that you're going to take action, right? Reward cost. How can you make in your mind to make the reward bigger, clearer, closer, meaningful, and the cost smaller, also very clear, and make it manageable, make very clear, simple first step and act on it immediately. So that is kind of the procrastination, guys. The very core, the very essence, the very foundational concept of why it happens in your brain. So next time you find yourself procrastinating, just talk to yourself honestly. Where is my reward? Am I really that clear about that? And what are the costs? Am I really clear about that? And how can I make the reward bigger and the cost smaller if I'm serious about taking actions? Right, I wrote down quite a few other things, but they're mostly about building long-term habits. I'm going to give you a few because, if you decide to, let's say, do something more long-term, like a podcast, right? So it's more like a habitual, repeated action, and you need to treat it more like a habit. So now you did it the first time, Justin with Jade. But how do you make it consistent? Well, the first thing, of course, keep scheduling, right? Keep putting the time to work on the podcast in your calendar for different aspects of it, like getting the people to interview and then scheduling the time to actually record the podcast and maybe do a little bit of post-production too, although at first really keep it simple. So you schedule it. This is number one. And how you schedule it is you schedule it ideally the same day, the same time, because usually the more consistent you are, it becomes the habit in your mind. And so when the time comes, you almost want to do it. Like you can't wait to do it. You can't stop yourself from doing that, right? Once you schedule it, the same pattern, like same day, same hours, etc. Now, to fortify this habit, you want to, and this is again from neuroscience research, all of the people who do something repeatedly, who succeed with building new rituals, they do that they track in your material world, in your reality. Somehow they track the progress. And with the case of a podcast, what's the progress? Well, at first it's going to be how many episodes you actually did. So you did the one with Jake, you maybe got a calendar, you put it on your wall on some prominent place, and you put a check mark. Okay, one is done. What's next, right? And you did the next one, 2 are done. And you did the next one, 3 are done. And now you don't want to be breaking the chain. You're like, I already put so much energy into that. That probably is important. And I am making progress, right? Track progress in as many ways as possible, but also don't overwhelm yourself, but have at least one that is something physical, because when we put some energy, some physical action into it, we are more likely to feel the reward and the meaningfulness of that experience, right? And that's, again, done on research on performers, on different creators who are able to consistently deliver actions, right? So track it physically in some way. Then also use the environment to help yourself to do that consistently. And by using your environment, I mean make things you want to do easy, make things you don't want to do hard, and use your environment, meaning if you want to do the podcast, so make it easy. Put your microphone, put your phone somewhere very close, not like in some cupboard that is hard to find, right there, so you can grab it and go. Even if somebody pops into your apartment all of a sudden, and they can be really great guests, just keep it simple. Have a room, have a mic right there, and you're ready to go, right? And then things that you don't want to do, like procrastinating on that hard. So, and by that, I mean, maybe commit to some other person, right? Obviously, if you're going to be interviewing someone, you're already going to be committing to people. But then keep someone to keep you accountable. That can be making quitting hard, because it will be kind of painful to say that you're going to do that, but then not doing that. So, and that's also has a name, actually, commitment device, making quitting or not doing hard or painful. So have some of those. Also, it really works if you put that habit that you're procrastinating on in between the habits that you already do. So maybe on Monday you have a slot of time between your calls where you don't have anything planned regularly. So, but you have those calls regularly. So schedule it right there. Call 1, podcast recording, call 2. And because those calls you're going to be doing anyway, after a while, you'll just condition this pattern. You're like, call 1, podcast, call 2, right? It's going to become one whole ritual instead of several things. That also helps very effectively to a lot of people. In the case of foam rolling, what I recommend to my clients, like, what do you do in the evening already? You brush your teeth, you take a shower. So let's say that in the evening, I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to foam roll for 5 minutes, I'm going to take a shower, and I'm going to go to bed. So that's going to be you and you habit sandwich. And that's how, after a while, it's going to be hard for you to forget to not foam roll, because you brush your teeth, you foam roll, you take a shower, you go to bed, right? So that's called habit sandwiching. And that's also a very effective technique to stop procrastination. And also it kind of bleeds into forgetting to do things. The most important thing, guys, I believe, is accountability. Like, have someone to keep you accountable on doing that meaningful thing, new action, like maybe recording a podcast or starting your YouTube channel. Have someone keeping you accountable. That is very, very important. Also, it helps having other people who are maybe into podcasts, right? If we are talking about podcasts, some other content creators who you can catch up once in a while. Like, hey, how are you doing with this project? What did you learn? What's new, right? What's happening? And that also helps us to not procrastinate and see ourselves being in that field. But in general, procrastination. Let's recap, guys. There are, again, many tools, but most of those tools, and probably next week, I'm going to take a time to give you all the tools for habit building. Like, okay, now you started to think, how do you maintain it? How do you keep your habits going? With procrastination, the most important thing to understand, when you are procrastinating on something, and maybe you're always procrastinating on things, realize that in your mind, the reward is not that great and the costs are many and plenty. And this cost reward ratio is not in your favor. So you can, and if you truly want to change this pattern of procrastination because it makes you rush, it makes you deliver the work that is of not the quality that you could deliver. Maybe that's why you don't appear to be as good with your skills as you actually are. Procrastination can be a negative thing in your life in many ways. And so if you are really committed to changing that, then you really need to work on that self-talk, making your reward much bigger. Again, here we want to think about making it clear, making it close. We also know that more dopamine is released when we feel like the reward is close, right? So maybe break down bigger goals. So clear, vivid, right there, juicy, and it's going to be meaningful to you. In some way, make any action that you need to take meaningful. Figure it out, dig deeper. What is meaningful to you? Why this action is meaningful to you? And then make costs as smaller as possible. Make them clear, make them small, only focus on the next step, not on 10 steps after that. No, very often you take the first step and you learn, maybe it doesn't work at all. Maybe you have to make a completely different plan, right? So one step at a time, make it clear, make it small, make the cost of starting something very, very tiny. And that's the essence of procrastination. Once you understand it, it's so much easier to just get into action because, let's be honest, guys, no progress happens when we are procrastinating. And I think I want to give you another tool to cancel procrastination of your life. I call it procrastination killer question. And the question goes like this. What am I killing in my life, in my future? What am I killing in my future by not taking this action? What am I killing in my future by delaying this action? What am I killing in my future by always postponing it for later, right? What life am I postponing for later? That's the ultimate question. That's it about procrastination. If you have any questions at all, let me know. Angela at brainbreakthroughcoach.com. If you need to learn something more, if you want to learn where you could read more about it, also reach out. If you love this episode, please also let me know, because that means for me that I'm adding value into your life. And that also means that I'm helping people, that I'm making the world better. And it also helps me to adjust, like, okay, what you liked, what you didn't like, what should I bring more of, what should I bring less of. I love doing this podcast, but it's also for you guys. So let me know, share this podcast if you found it useful with other people so other people can learn and change their life for the better. Get in touch and stop procrastinating, right? Till next time, figure that out. If you want to cancel procrastination of your life, figure that out, where reward is not that big and where the costs are too big. What are you making them? Why are you making them look like that? You can change it. The power is in your mind. Use it. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you very soon.